Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today, the people who matter, at least in this conversation, are the people in my Wednesday morning mastermind group. Every single Wednesday morning since 2019, we've been getting together at 7:30 Central Time to spend an hour together on different topics and books. We've studied different books. And this morning we had a conversation like we do every Wednesday morning that was very enlightening and insightful for me. I took notes. And one of the things we talked about today was the distinction between drive, being driven to do something, and being compelled to do it. To me, that's two very different things. Being driven feels like a push, and being compelled feels like a pull. So for me, I have this space to work some of these ideas out with a group of very trusted humans who I just don't know where my life would be without. And so we were talking about a lot of different things in the hour we were together today. And one of the things that occurred to me was the timing of my life. I'm going to just break this down a little bit and tell you more about that. But I recognized this morning, as I have in the past, but today it became very clear that things happen in a certain time frame, and it might not always be mine. I tend to be a little impatient when I understand something in a new way. I want to share it with everybody. I want to invite people to be part of conversations and dialogues that take our energy level to a different high so that our vibrational energy attracts the resources we wish to use and the cooperation of other people, all those kinds of things. I see things quickly. I understand things pretty quickly. I always have my whole life in looking back. And then I've been either impatient, I've been frustrated with others, I've tried to hide what I know about myself so that I can fit in with other people. So I've dimmed my light when others have told me my light is too bright for them. All these kinds of things as I'm kind of thinking back on why I felt compelled, that's my word, compelled to continue to read and learn and grow. And the language that has made sense to me in that capacity is the what would I call it? The model, I guess, from the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. The above the line and below the line. And the way the authors talk about that is above the line is conscious, where we're aware of things in a different way than when we're below the line, which is unconscious. I mean, we're unconscious. We're doing the best we can with what we know. And when we find ourselves in a space of unconsciousness, we're not aware of it. And they say below the line in unconscious awareness would be closed, defensive, and committed to being right. And I think back on my life as I would learn something new. Even when I learned to read at 3, I remember being in first grade, 6 years old, having already read for half of my life at that point, where I was reading fifth grade books by then, and thinking to myself the day the teacher brought out the Dick and Jane books, today they get to learn to read. I remember thinking that as a 6 year old. And I remember thinking their world is going to open up to them the way mine did. And then I had kids in my class who hated reading, who didn't like being in school. And I started thinking, even then, what's wrong with me? That I love this. And the vision I had for things and the awareness I had me read, had me learn. It's who I am wired to be. It's who I'm born to be. And understanding that about the timing of things is really occurring in a cool way for me right now. So I will go back and talk about first our event we have coming up next week, Chill Out 2025, which is our third annual Chill Out event. We're not doing it like we've done in the past. We're using something called open space technology. And this is not something I've made up. Harrison Owen wrote this book about open space technology, which I'm looking at the publishing date, 1997. So nothing new about this, really. It's been used for a long time before they wrote the book about it. And so we're using this, which is kind of like choose your own adventure for what we're up to in the conversations we're going to have. So then that's happening. Whether or not that is a success, we'll see. I'm willing to take that chance to go against a format that worked for the 2 years before that, because I really believe that there are people in the world who are ready to have these kinds of choose your own adventure dialogues with other like-minded and like-hearted people. So then I'm thinking about the books that I've been reading in the, really, what was this, near past. The book that I've heard a lot of people talk about online lately in the place we find ourselves in the world is this one called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion by Jonathan Haidt. And I remember feeling like that book sounded really good recently in the last couple of months. And I went to Amazon to buy it, and it turns out I bought it in, I don't know, 2016 maybe. I must have had it somewhere. And I looked on my shelf, and sure enough, there it was. And I see that I had started reading it but didn't get too far into it for some reason. But this book was published in, I'm looking again for the publishing date. Pardon me for the turning of the pages. But the date this was published was 2012. So published in 2012, first vintage books edition in January of 2013. Not new, but very, the timing is right for that, right? The timing. So then, for some reason, I've really resurrected my love affair with Simon Sinek. I have this huge crush on Simon Sinek and the way he's doing the work he's doing. I first heard about him in 2009, so he's not new to me. But in the last year or so, I've gotten really immersed in his podcast, a bit of optimism, and some of the things he's been doing. So I went back and picked up a book that he had written. I don't know if it was his first book, but he had published this book in 2014. This is called Leaders Eat Last. Again, I've had it. I just didn't really dig in until now. And this book, oh my goodness, the timing of this book is so profound for what we're experiencing right now. And he wrote it way before we had the events in the world we have right now. It is so current. And this book makes so much sense right now. And so, timing. So I finished that one, love it, have learned a lot, have gotten a lot of validation for the things I've been thinking about. So I picked up another book randomly, which I've also read before. And this one was published in, I'm looking for the publishing date, 1996. 1996, a long time ago. Synchronicity: The Inner Path of Leadership, Joseph Jaworski. Oh my goodness, I am telling you, the timing for this one is profound and perfect for right now. And I'm reminded why I loved that book so much. So I can't even explain to you about the awareness I have about timing. And divine timing is not my timing. Things are happening in the world in a way that if I can stay in observation mode and do my best not to get into judgment mode, man, I learn a lot. The challenge I have personally for me, being someone who I've explained saw things as not a visionary, but a thought leader, I guess. I saw things a long time ago and I glommed onto them. I mean, go back to being 3 and then in my first grade class recognizing things differently. I used to think that was wrong and bad and it didn't fit in, and so I needed to change. And now I recognize from Simon Sinek, from Jonathan Haidt, from Joseph Jaworski, from the people who I'm really loving reading right now, that they probably had similar feelings about things. They felt the need to write a book about something they were experiencing in the hope, perhaps, that someone would read it and like it and connect with it and have a conversation about it, which I'm doing today, however many years later. So really, principles are timeless. Fundamentals are timeless. when you hear something and you go, oh, yes, that makes perfect sense to my head, to my heart, and to my gut. When you have that experience reading a book, this morning we were talking about one of my mastermind people took her son to an opera, a jazz opera, if you can imagine that. And she said, it made all the hair on her head stand up, she said. And when you feel that and you have that experience, that visceral experience of something, you, you just know it's right. This can't be wrong. You know, Chris and I are talking about that in both in the Groundswell, which is his movement, and Enlightened Leadership Lab, which is our partnership on Mondays. And we talk about how when you land on something that just can't be wrong, despite all of the conditions outside that would have you stop or have you question or have you try to be like everyone else, that I call it a compulsion, and that's not the right word, but a compelling need. That's not the right word either. Words are so clunky. A pull towards something instead of a fight against something. So a pull towards something for me in the way I see things, in the way I hope that I can invite people into that kind of dialogue is where I sit today in this uncomfortableness, yet knowingness that there's something on the other side. So, Andrea, hi. Sorry, I just got on a rant there. Andrea, friend from college, thank you for being here. She says, don't change. To change the world, you stand alone until the world catches up with you with integrity. Yeah, magnet, Andrea. Yes. Thank you for inviting me to be part of a group that you facilitate. Andrea lives in New York and Long Island, Andrea, I believe. And she facilitates a group of people who are trying to find their way in the world right now. We talked about politics when I was there. It can be politics. That's one condition of humanity right now. And it's a pretty big one for many of us. And it can create some divides. I look at the divides that are, it's hard to ignore some of the divides. And I look at that as the right and left sides get further and further apart. It feels to me like the gap between the sides is getting larger, which could either be disparaging, oh, it's just so big and the gap is so wide, or it could be, wow, there's a lot more opportunity and possibility to find something where those far, far sides might have something in common. And this morning in my mastermind group, I was telling them, I don't want to be the one to do this. I don't want this to be my calling. I want to just ride it out. And sometimes it would be so much easier to just be able to have an opinion and share my opinion with the people who agree with my opinion. And then we would all, you know, yes, let's fight against the other side. Sometimes that would be so much easier because I do have my opinions. Yet I just don't feel that's the way I can make a difference in the world. To just stand on one side and fight against the other one. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying that's right for anyone else. I'm saying for me. I believe that coming together in a dialogue, and I'm going to keep harping on that word because I remembered today as I'm reading Synchronicity, the inner path of leadership, which I told you I first picked up in the 90s, the late 1900s. I remember where I first understood the term dialogue. It's from this book, Divine Timing. David Bohm uh, was the one who talked about dialogue here in this book in 1997, which I'm guessing he didn't make up. But the definition I use for dialogue is suspending previous assumptions in order to learn something from each other. And what if we would do that? What if we would understand dialogue in a space where, man, I want to be open to hearing the way you see the world? And I know Andrea's writing, I struggle because truth has lost its value. It is a battle for truth. And that is, I get that. It is a battle. And I have conversations about truth in different parts of my life. And there are people who believe there's one ultimate truth, capital T truth, and everything that's not that is wrong. And if you don't believe that, you're wrong. And then there are people who understand that my perspective provides my view of what is true. And then that opens up a debate about my truth and your truth and what is truth. And it's hard, it's difficult. And it depends a lot on how you were raised. It depends a lot on what you understood in your upbringing. I'm not disparaging people who not believe in, it sounds like I'm denigrating that, but who stand for a capital T truth, that they are there to tell you it is this way, and if you don't believe this way, your soul will be damned to hell forever. I'm not disparaging that. I was raised in that space. And that's where I struggle sometimes to understand a capital T truth that would say only a small, part of any population has it figured out. And until you figure it out my way, you're damned to hell. I just have a really hard time with that personally, but that doesn't mean my way is the way. It means that if I could have a conversation with someone about that, where they would say, yeah, let's consider that, instead of saying you are wrong. I just think there'd be so much more opportunity for me to say, let me consider, let me ponder that, let me discern that, let me ask my higher power, my whatever you call it. I mean, there's a whole group right now of people who want to get religion out of any conversation. The Freedom from Religion organization is a movement to have people start thinking for themselves. I believe that there's a place for us to think for ourselves. I also believe in a higher power. So right there, that's a distinguishing characteristic too. So it's difficult to be in this space. It's difficult to see that there could be many ways of seeing the world. It's difficult not to be able to say to somebody, I believe this. Please support me in what I believe, not so that we can fight against somebody who doesn't believe that way, but maybe so that I don't feel like I'm the only one. In some cases, I want to feel like it's okay for me to be frustrated and upset and tired and wishing I didn't have this calling, wishing that there was some other way for me to be able to be in the world, wishing that my voice could be a voice for a position. And I don't know. I don't feel like that's what it is. I feel like when people are in a space where they respect discernment, a lot can happen. A lot of really cool things can happen. The timing might not, like I said earlier, might not be my timing. I think back to when I got my master's degree back in the early 2000s. And I got my master's degree from a Catholic university. And I was raised in a strict Lutheran upbringing where it was almost like as a little kid, I was scared of Catholics. And it's weird to think about that now, but I was scared of them. I was scared for them. And my job was to pray for the Catholics because they needed to see the light the way my denomination saw it. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me now, but then that's the way it was. And so I got my degree at this Catholic university, and one of my classes was taught by a Catholic nun. And I tell you, as an adult, I still had that space in me where I'm like, ooh, I've got to be on my guard. Because what if she says something that tries to convert me to Catholicism? Again, just doesn't make any sense when I say it like that now. But I learned more from that human being than, I mean, I have three people I can point to where I learned so much. She was one. And oh my goodness, she taught me about quantum mechanics. She taught me about spirituality as opposed to religion. She taught me about so many things. And she was a Catholic nun who I was supposed to be afraid of and supposed to pray for. If I had been closed to the possibility I could have gotten from her, that I did get from her, I would be a different person. I would not have understood and learned the things that I've learned. Andrea talks about empathy. Empathy is not a shared concept. Golly, and I'm thinking about empathy then. And I'm thinking about a friend of mine who's a very successful business person. And this person recognized somewhere not that long ago that she doesn't relate to empathy. She doesn't understand that as a concept. And that's fascinating to me that she would say, "Oh my goodness, there's another way of seeing the world and I didn't know it." I think about concepts like narcissism or concepts like I don't know, whataboutism or some of the things that we see in our lives. And I wonder about what it is that has people be the way they are. Because my curiosity is about the human. What is it that had the human be the way the human is? And empathy, I don't understand that people don't understand empathy because I probably err on the side of empathy too much. Um, Too much again compared to what? There's this language is so interesting and can be so clunky. Yet if we allow each other grace, if we come into a space with grace and we say, I'm willing to allow people to have conversations that may be clunky. They may say something that isn't exactly what they meant. And yet I'm not going to throw a gotcha bomb at that person and say, you were wrong. I'm going to prove that you were wrong because my way of being is to be right. That's unconscious. And we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. That's the way I see the world. Now people will disagree with me. They've canceled me about that concept. Um, I don't know. It's the way I see the world now until I have an opportunity to change my mind. I assume positive intent. It's just the way I am. Not to say I can't change my mind, can't change my perspective, can't change my understanding with more information and more opportunity to discern. I can. I pride myself on being open. And for some people, that's not good. It's such a weird space to be in. Yet, wouldn't you rather be in a space where you feel safe to explore some of these things? Where you have listening space from other humans who will encourage you to talk through what you're thinking, who will have the empathy that you say, Andrea, to allow people to come into that open space. Andrea says, not having empathy allows people to be successful while sacrificing human connection. But I find those individuals have less happiness in success. So that's an observation for sure, Andrea. Yes. And I can say it looks to me like that person wouldn't have as much happiness. And I'm not that person. So for me, the engagement in the conversation and the dialogue is what can have a shared um, understanding. Kouzes and Posner called that the pool of shared meaning, where there's something we can give to and take from in a safe space. And if somebody on the outside doesn't appear happy, I don't know that I can help their own condition. This morning, one of my mastermind people said to me, I hadn't said anything. And she said, you feel a little down to me today. We're on virtual. It's virtual. She's in Arizona. I'm in North Dakota. And she said, you feel a little down to me. And I thought, wow, am I? And that was my opening to say, I guess when I really think about it, I am a little down today. I do feel a little daunted by this mission, this calling, this purpose that I feel is mine to own in the world. And so we talked about it, and I felt safe. And she gave me another perspective. And then, it was just such a beautiful space of sharing and observing and noticing and seeing each other as humans in that space. And I really feel that if we had more opportunity to do that in the world, those people who are being witnessed, who are being seen and gotten and understood and accepted would have that space to say what's on their heart. So that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here to do. That's the doing part. Before the doing is the being. And I will do my best to be someone who shares empathy, who shares dialogue, who shares space, who holds that open space so that people can step into it in a way that allows their own wisdom to come out. So if it takes, you say, Andrea, it took her empathy to connect on that higher level. So I love this conversation that we're having, Andrea. Andrea and I are having a conversation in public, which is the possibility that exists all the time if people take the opportunity. And so that's what Chill Out is going to be about next week. We don't have very many people, but the people who are there are the right people. It's going to be a small, really committed group of people who will allow these kinds of conversations to happen. And we'll see how that goes with the format. I'm willing to take that risk because I feel that this is where we could go in the world to maybe shore up our empathy, see people as humans and not only as objects, witness and demonstrate how that works, be part of the being in the space and part of the doing something afterwards where we say, okay, that was fun. Now what? What do we take into the world beyond the time we're together? Because insight without action makes no real lasting difference until I guess the timing would be right. So there's a lot there. I said a lot that I'll have to go back and listen to later because it sort of came through me, related to divine timing. Not in my timing, but in divine timing. Simon Sinek, by the way, we laughed about that today. He's such an open, amazing human, and his last name is Sinek, Sinek, which sounds like Cynic, Cynic. Another one is Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the Righteous Mind. I think his last name is pronounced Haidt, Haidt. Would that be Haidt? What an interesting last name for someone who wants to understand why good people are divided by politics and religion. So just kind of a funny to end here. Andrea says, also, when you have empathy, it places your heart with the less fortunate. It is not as fun to live in that space because it is heavy. So then we would curse our empathy. And I wonder if there's maybe extreme empathy does that and has people feel so downtrodden all the time. Maybe there are places for those of us who understand empathy but don't necessarily let it overtake us. I mean, again, clunky language here. But what could I do for the people who are downtrodden, who do have that experience of living that I don't have? Might there be a way to at least be a voice for some of the people who don't have that voice, who don't have the opportunity to know what I know? And then somebody can hear this and say, oh, you have privilege. Oh, you are, yeah, you could everybody can look at somebody else in a judgmental way. We're all looking through our own eyes at the world we see. And if we take a little bit of extra effort to imagine that someone else's perspective is equally valuable as mine, that's where I think we can have shared meaning. So if we continue, as Andrea says, I try to apply it into action to make this world a better place. What else is there in this lifetime, Andrea, than that? I try to apply it into action to make this world a better place. To me, that's what we're here for. So thank you, everybody, for allowing me to just kind of stream of consciousness this morning. I appreciate you. I appreciate people who are listening to the podcast. We're coming up on our 6th season. We have more than 250 episodes. I would love it if you would help me spread the word about this. If there's anything of value, I would love more people to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And maybe they just need a starting place. Maybe they just need a space to circle up and get real. And this can be that space. There will be more to come. I feel my calling is bigger than me, so I will do what I can to follow that. And I'll count on you to help me stay in that space. So as always, go find opportunities this week to get real in your own life. Radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. You can learn more about that in my new book too, which is Just Give a Shit, Dare to Care, Get Real, and transform your world, which, by the way, is out on Audible as well. My first book on Audible. That's been fun. So thanks, everybody. Take care, and we'll talk again.